If you're a sustainability leader, perhaps a head of sustainability or director of sustainability, and you've been struggling to sell your initiatives to your board, to clients, or to your own colleagues, then you might want to listen on. I'm Virginia Cinquemani. I'm a sustainability trainer, coach, and best-selling author of The Good Communicator, How to Make Sustainability Irresistible, and I help sustainability leaders just like you influence others without burnout. In this video, I am going to talk about what you can practically do to put together the right argument to influence any audience and convince them of your initiative. Now, I'm not talking about putting together the formal business case for sustainability, although you could use some of these principles to put that together, but there is plenty of literature out there on how to do this. In here, I'm going to talk about those day-to-day conversations and meetings you might have with your board, your clients, your colleagues, in which you want to convince them to go beyond the bare minimum and ticking the box of compliance. I have a construction background, and it's so common, for example, in construction to just want to go for the certification. BREEAM is an example, the BRE environmental assessment method for buildings. But what about the rest of sustainability? So this is what we'll try and do. And even if you don't work in construction, but in other industry, everything that I'm saying should be relevant to you. But before we start, please subscribe and like this video, obviously, if you like it, because it helps me enormously. Thank you. So it's a known fact that sustainability can make money and save money. This is not an argument. We know that by now. So, for example, while researching for this video, I found out about ROSI, the ROSI framework, which is the return on sustainable investment developed by the NYU Stern Center for Sustainable Business. In 2024, Deloitte carried out a survey along with the Stern Center for Sustainable Business of 350 executives in the agriculture and food industry sector, and over 70% reported reduction in cost and increase in revenue of at least 2% by adopting sustainable measures. So that's not something that we question anymore. So how come that we somehow still fail to convince other people to adopt sustainability and our ideas? So I found out through experience and to the experience of my clients that there are a few categories, let's say, of audiences that struggle specifically to accept sustainability as business as usual. And this could be SMEs, so small and medium enterprises that might fight day to day to survive in the marketplace. There could be people that are new and organizations that are new to sustainability, so they simply don't understand it. Some industries, specifically some people, might have strong biases against it, maybe because of past bad experiences, and they think it's just a waste of money and time, possibly. And other people who have ingrained ways of working. So, for example, again, going back to my original industry, construction, people that have been bricklaying for 30 years, they struggle to accept change and new things and innovation. Now, I would love for you to put in the comments who are the audiences that you struggle the most with, and I'll try and help you by commenting below. The thing is, you don't have to necessarily convince everybody, and that's one very important point that I hope I can get across. You need to understand the person within that pool of people that, for example, belong to the organization that you really need to influence. And that already saves you a lot of time and energy. I'm going to talk about that specifically perhaps in another video. But here I want to focus on the technique based on who you got in front of you. Now, some of these people might struggle to accept sustainability, which means you can't just present to them facts and data, because facts and data on their own don't convince anybody. Now, the issue is when we start a conversation with somebody, maybe a meeting or a presentation, we tend to focus on ourselves and the message we want to convey and the objective we might have in our head. So what I'm suggesting you do instead is to shift your attention from yourself to your audience. So we tend to overlook what the audience wants, what the audience need mostly, because sometimes they know what they want, but they don't know what they need, and we need to marry those two together as much as we can. What we do instead is to showcase our expertise, because we want to obviously come across as knowledgeable and we want their trust. But by doing that and using big words, acronyms, jargon, all of this stuff, we tend to alienate people as opposed to take them on board with us. So an example of that was years ago when I was supporting a senior consultant into a meeting, and the senior consultant had to talk about the BREEAM bespoke process, which is quite an intricate, admin heavy process in the assessment of buildings, of sustainable buildings. So first meeting with a design team. And my colleague, so I was junior, so I didn't say very much besides hello. My colleague said also hello, and then sat down and immediately opened up the 400-page manual the BREEAM gives you and started reading from it and started imposing basically what this design team should have done for water, for energy, for pollution, etc. So going straight into the subject and the technicalities of it. And I remember feeling unease because I thought, well, we didn't even say hello or, try and understand what these people's priorities are or challenges are. And we are going straight into what they should do, which is what somebody in this industry very often does. And again, it's not judgment because we've all done it, but we need to shift our attention. We need to really prioritize what the people in front of us need and want, what their views are over what we think is the right thing. It might be that we're right, but this process is quite important because it builds trust. And that's the main thing you should aim at to start with, especially with a new client, especially with a new audience of some sort. Building trust is absolutely fundamental. And you can only do that if you establish a rapport with these people first, via questioning, via understanding what they like, what they dislike, really having even that small talk that we dismiss, especially in the days of digital communication. Small talk goes away. So it's super, super important to build the trust between you and that person or those people and get them to trust you and listen to you and your advice. So please don't skip that step because it's super important. Another very common mistake we make is to use the ethical argument. And guys, we are right. In the sense that, of course, sustainability is a no-brainer. Of course, sustainability is the way to go because common sense. However, not everybody shares your same values. Not everybody shares the same views. So you better attack, say, from another side, not from the ethical argument. They might prioritize business longevity, they might prioritize money, they might prioritize marketing and creating a community over environment and people. And that's okay. Hopefully in time they will also see our values on our side, but starting with the ethical argument and values is, I think, a faux pas because it might already bring up some barriers that otherwise you wouldn't have. But even when we go with the money argument, which is the easy one, okay, everybody's in business here, everybody needs to make money, it's not always the right financial incentive that we decide to use. So I've been in meetings in which, say, a colleague is trying to push the operational savings that you get from sustainable buildings over time. So, for example, the classic saving energy and saving water. But if you're talking to a developer who's building the building today and wants to sell it tomorrow, this is not the right argument because they do not care, as simple as that. So we need to start from a different point of view. And the point of view, like I said at the start, is that you need to focus on your audience. Every audience is different. Every person you meet will be different. But we can do several things to try and understand what can resonate with them, if it's not money in the way we perceive it, or perhaps the ethical argument or the advantages of what we're trying to propose. I will start from analyzing the situation around the project that you have, or the conversation, whatever topic that you're trying to change or influence. And that could be the context around risks and opportunities that that particular situation offers. That's based on PESTLE, and you can use the PESTLE acronym, which is political, economic, social, technological, legal, and environmental factors that might influence that particular situation. For example, are there any green grants that this team, for example, can ask for, can require, can apply for? There are new laws coming into force. Are there any opportunities or risks connected to the location where this particular thing is happening? And of course, I'm trying to keep it generic because this can work in any possible situation. External stakeholders, this could be the competition, it could be the community around a particular project, it could be any contractors and supply chain that are involved in some shape or form with the organization that you're talking to, but even the local authority if they impose some kind of regulations or laws. Other factors to consider are the internal stakeholders, so the staff. How are they affected or will affect the project that you are trying to influence? Or, for example, the shareholders, the people that actually invest in this project, the sustainability champions, the board of directors, the unions. So anybody that is inside the organization that you're talking to that might have an impact or be impacted by the changes that you're trying to propose. And then last but not least, let's not forget nature, because it's actually a very good idea to involve nature as a stakeholder. At least ask the question, what would nature do? What would nature say in this case? How is she going to be affected in some way? So she's going to affect this project in some ways. And these are the basic elements that you can consider before you even start suggesting solutions, because this will give you a very full and rich background to the context, to the project that you're trying to influence. And then you'll have a lot of arguments. You will find a lot of opportunities to choose the right way to approach your audience by doing this analysis first. So once you have clarity over the context of any influencing factors, any risks, any opportunities, any stakeholders, etc., then you have some good questions that you can ask yourself before, again, you put together your arguments before that famous meeting that you have to have. And they go back to that research that you've done around the context. And the first one would be, what are the biggest challenges or risks that sustainability can help address? The second one could be, what are the biggest opportunities? And importantly, and probably something to start with, is what is my audience like? You can see in my previous video here how to approach an audience, understand an audience better so that you can influence them better. And what are they interested in and what could resonate with them? Finally, what do they get out of this process if they listen to me? So some of these questions are connected to the context and some are more specific to the audience you're speaking to. And I believe you need to understand both elements really well before you try and influence anybody of anything. Because otherwise you are using box standard solutions that might not fit the specific situation and project. So I'll give you an example. One of the people that kindly shared their experience for my book, The Good Communicator, was a sustainability consultant who was trying to influence a developer to change the way they measure energy and trying to reduce energy. So our focus was energy and carbon. However, this person didn't want to budge. The usual arguments: we don't have the money, we don't have the resources, we always done it this way, etc. So what this person did instead was to keep on asking him questions and try and understand what actually resonated for him. What did he care about? And then she found out that he cared about ecology, he cared about landscaping, probably was a keen gardener in his spare time. And from that on, so starting by rewilding the project that they were both involved in, and by focusing on landscaping and ecology and biodiversity, then eventually she managed to convince him to go for energy as well. The thing is, she started from what that particular person was keen on and helped him achieve his goals in that particular area. And through that process, she gained his trust. Then she could also push for other things that were important for her, and she knew that would be important for the project as well. So it's a very well-known fact that any sales process is actually an emotional process more than a rational one. So we might as well use that fact to create and to build our business case. So here's where, once you've done your analysis, once you've done your prep work of the context, but also the people that you got in front of you, then you can start putting together some good solid arguments that you know they are gonna resonate with your audience. And I put together a table for you in which I use the three key elements, the three key categories, let's say, of arguments that you can use to build a business case. So let's look at this together. So the first is return on investment, and that is all the classic stuff that we usually use to convince somebody else to adopt sustainability. So the money side of things: cost and operational savings, higher rental and sales yield, quicker sales, access to finance, but also, let's not forget, increased staff and operational productivity. Now, like I said before, you need to be careful about using the right return on investment argument, because some people might be interested in making money now. Some people might be more interested in longevity and making money in the long term, etc. So that's why the analysis that I suggested before is really important. Although money resonates to most people, you need to also pick the right one. The second category of business case for sustainability arguments is risk management, and it's something that is often overlooked. But sustainability is excellent at managing risk and helping people manage risk. So this is avoiding fines, law compliance, and due diligence, or ESG, CSR policy compliance. Now, all of these things you have to do it because you set up some procedures and policies that impose it on you. The law wants it. You're gonna get fined, etc. However, I suggest that beside what people must do, you add another couple of nice to do as arguments of, to build your business case, because you want people to actually be invested in sustainability. You want not just to have people that do it because they have to do it. You want to give people the opportunity to have agency in it and maybe become passionate about it, a bit like you and I. But other things like operational risk management is really excellent. Good governance, which is very topical at the moment since ESG has become almost like a substitute to sustainability. And things like enhanced brand and reputation. Reputation is really important and is probably more valuable than any other asset in a company. So another category of business case for sustainability arguments that you can use is growth, another underused opportunity and another underused argument category. So things like talent and customer retention and attraction are super important for companies, and yet we think sustainability is just an extra cost. But lots of people are now very keen on the green issues, and so their customers and their talents who will be attracted by a company that does that quite well. Obviously, at this stage, is still an advantage over competition because it's not business as usual. So another advantage. And finally, let's not forget innovation and quality. Now, In all of this, do not forget to mention, if nothing else works, what happens if you don't do it? So the cost of inaction is super important. What happens if they do not follow your advice, if they do not adopt your initiatives? What is going to cost them in the long run? With the state of the world at the moment, oil is growing in price. Obviously, its resources is going to end at some point. Renewable energies are there. They are cheaper, virtually free in some certain cases. That's an easy one to see how it's going to cost companies a lot more to keep on going with their unsustainable ways than to adopt sustainable solutions and strategies. I hope this helps. Like with any skill, it has to be practiced. So start with the analysis, then go into selecting carefully what arguments you want to use in your next meeting or presentation, and let me know how it goes. See you next time.